So you bought a Miata and you want to know the quirks and features. Well, let's talk about them.
Now, the Miata is a fairly simple car. There's not really too much going on, but there are a couple hidden features with these cars and things that, as an owner, you should probably know. And the first one we're going to be talking about is the door latch right here. So here's the door handle, and here's the lock. If you simply lock it from the inside, get out of your car, and shut the door after all of that is still going to be unlocked. But now if we do the same thing, we lock it from the inside by sliding it over, but hold the handle open, close the door, it's now locked. A very weird mechanism, very weird how that works. Back in the 90s, this was pretty common in order to not lock yourself out of your car, and something that Mazda did in the Miata as well. Now, while we're on the topic of locks, in order to access the rear trunk, there's a keyhole here that you can turn and your trunk will open. But there's actually a secondary location that you can open the trunk from in most cars. Now, it doesn't help that my interior is completely taken apart, but the center console would normally be just about here, and if you open your center console, you find the release for your fuel door and also your rear trunk. But my car doesn't have one, and let me tell you why. Now, the reason my car doesn't have a trunk latch is because this is a 1990. 1990 and the beginning half of 1991 Miatas did not come with trunk latches from the factory. Now, this is something you can add to the cars, but just be aware that if you're looking for a 1990, 91, early 91 models, not only are they short nose cranks, but they're also missing those latches. Wait, what's a short nose crank? As many of you may know, this isn't a tip, trick, or a secret. The Miata came with two different engines, a 1.6 liter in the early years and a 1.8 liter in the late years. Early into the production with the 1990 and 1991 cars, the 1.6 was a little different from the later 1.6s. These cars were known as short nose cranks. Now, essentially, this doesn't really make too much of a difference, but it's something to note. If you can find a later car, it makes servicing the crank, makes servicing the timing belt a little bit easier. If you do end up finding a short nose crank car, it's not the end of the world. People seem to make it this huge failure that it's not. In reality, it's just a little harder to work on, and in order to work on it, you need to know what you're doing, otherwise you can mess something up. It's not the end of the world, but it's something to note when buying the car that you may not have known, or you even bought your car and you have a short nose crank and you didn't know. Now, this next one isn't so much of a secret as it is a tip. Miatas are very reliable engines, but when you don't take care of them, things go bad very quickly. And that's honestly with any car. One of the biggest things you have to deal with is the motor ticking, right? Lifter tick. And that happens because there either isn't enough oil in the cars, or just with age the lifter goes bad and it makes a little bit of a ticking sound. The engines are noisy. That's not something to be concerned about, but what is something to be concerned about is the timing belt jobs, water pump jobs, and also radiators going bad. Now, I bring this up because the radiator going bad is a very common concern. But also, the timing belt is a 60,000 mile interval, so you have to do the timing belt job every 60,000. And if your car over 100 or 120,000 miles and you don't know if a timing belt has been done, I highly recommend you do it. 60,000 is an aggressive milestone for a timing belt in my opinion, and especially with modern day belts and things. But if you don't know if it's been done, you should probably just bite the bullet and do it at some point, especially if you're looking to beat on the car on the track. Now, I talked about the radiator being a common place for concern as well. If your radiator is turning green or brownish, I highly recommend you change it, because that means it's going to be going bad. In a lot of Miatas, you will see the radiators turning green, and that usually indicates that you need to replace it, and I highly recommend you do it sooner than later, because you definitely want to keep your car cold. You ever frustrated about how your headlights never line up with your hood and the space is super uneven? Well, let me show you how to fix that, and also give you a couple other tips and tricks with the flip-ups. Now, come lift up your hood, get this out of the way, and simply what you're going to do is you're going to lift on the back of this. Don't pull terribly hard, but just hard enough to get it to bend upwards again. Now, it's a pretty common thing for them to go down. It won't last you too long, but it's just something that, for those people who it really annoys like me, gets it done. You can kind of level it out with the fender line there. Now you can see that it's level with the hood and it looks super crispy. Now you have your headlights on, but you need to adjust them. This little red knob here behind the lights will adjust them up or down. So if you want to get them both pointing directly straight, simple adjustment is right here. Now if you own a Miata or if you're looking to buy one, I'm sure almost everyone knows this, but if you're wondering how to flip the lights up and down without actually turning them on, in the center console next to the hazard light underneath it actually, there is a service light for the headlights. Now those who either took money out of their 401k or a second mortgage on their house and are fortunate enough to have a hardtop, let me teach you a couple tricks about it. At this point, the Miata hardtop costs as much as a Miata does, which is kind of crazy, and I paid for it because I think it looks awesome, but I paid more for this hardtop than I paid for my second Miata. But if you just bought a hardtop and your car wasn't equipped with one from factory, you can't just slap it on like I did because it's not safe to drive. And let me show you what you need to do. So you have 3 pairs of latch points on the hardtop. 2 are in the front where the soft top go. The other one I'll show you in a second, but the one inside the car is right here. Now usually your car will have a striker plate right here if you've ever had a hardtop installed. And this latch will go on that striker plate. And if you don't have that striker plate, it causes the hardtop to not be securely fastened to the car. Don't have them on my car yet, but it's something that I need to do before I really seriously drive it. And here's the third latch point. You ever wonder what the little bolts that stick out of your car right here for? They're for the hardtop. Now this piece here unscrews and it gets out of the way and you can actually adjust them. So these latches open from this screw right here. Now both of mine are frozen shut, so at the moment I can't show you guys or adjust them, but I'll put a picture up on the screen. These basically slide open and there's 2 bolts underneath, and you'll see the Frankenstein bolt. The little piece should live underneath the Frankenstein bolt, and you can adjust it underneath there to make sure the hardtop is nice and snug. Now this tip is for hardtop and soft top users. You ever wonder why your hardtop or soft top front latches don't quite fit? Well, it's because there's an adjustment. Right here, if you flick this plastic piece down, this right here is an adjustment for the latches on your hardtop and soft top to fit onto the front here. Mine clearly needs to be adjusted. My soft top is still in my car. Right here, you can see the same adjustment like I showed you on my hardtop. I'm gonna include a quick segment about wheel spec, because I think it's important. A little tip or trick about upgrading your wheels is, if you want to get a wheel, don't go more than 15 inches in diameter. If you go to a 16-inch wheel, the car is going to, number one, look goofy, but also it's going to take a little bit of performance away from the car. You don't want to go any larger than a 15 by 8. If you go to a 15 by 9 wheel setup, the 9 is how wide the wheel is, 15 is the inch diameter. If you go wider than 8 inches, it's going to start rubbing on the arms, and it's going to rub possibly on some of the tie rods in there as well. Overall, it just won't quite fit, but also you might have to pull the fender because of how far the wheel is going to come out and stick out. That also depends on offset, but 15 by 8 is kind of the biggest I found you can go without really making any modification whatsoever. I'm running a squared setup on my car, which means that fronts are same as rears, so these are also 15 by 7s. The tire spec on these is 205/50, giving a little bit of a nice kind of track spec fitment to the car, but also fitting on these wheels very nicely. Now, jacking points. Please don't jack your car up by this pinch weld here. Most of the time they all like to crumble. Someone's ruined mine. You can put your jack stand here because they are meant for that, but I highly advise against jacking it from the pinch weld unless you have the proper tool that can get underneath it, because otherwise it's just going to mess up that weld. Jack it up in the front. There's a brace that runs between the front 2 wheels. It's a very safe spot to jack up the car. Even put your jack stands underneath if you don't want them outwards. You can bring them inwards, and I advise if you're doing the front, jack it up from there. And when you're jacking up the rear end, just jack it up from the diff. Be a little careful, but that's the best 2 places I found, because like I said, you can mess these pinch welds up very fast. You want your shifter to feel like that? Does your shifter feel nice and worn out? Well, it has nothing to do with the short throw shifter I have installed in my car, and it has everything to do with the refreshed bushings in the car. Now yes, this short throw shifter makes it shorter, more crisper, and feel extremely nice. but the bushings are almost equally as important. If your shifter has a bunch of slop and it feels like this in first gear, change your bushings. Super important part. And those right there are some very important tips, tricks, and secrets that you should know about a Miata if you have one or you're planning to buy one. If you found this video informational in any way, make sure to subscribe down below, leave a comment on anything I've missed, and as always, I will see you guys in the next video. I just tried flipping my headlights up and down and then realized the battery's not in the car. Almost impossible to unlock it with the key. Now you can see here, it doesn't even want to unlock. Now I was trying myself. I've already broken a key inside this lock before.